Good afternoon, everyone. So how many of you here have a bank account with Chase? Majority of you. That's good. That's really good to know, because somehow, our team also plays a part in making sure your account is safe and secure, and at the same time, your transactions go through securely, right? So definitely not an ideal time for us to start after lunch. Hopefully, we'll try to do our best not to put you to sleep. If you guys have even any questions in between, we are actually happy to help. So I'm Gopi Gopalsamy. We manage a EPX platform, which is engineers' platform for experience, which basically includes everything that developer does within our organization, including code commit, build, deployment to production, the evidence service, the regulatory. And we do have around 45,000 developers within our organization, and then some of the services that we use, like Jira and Confluence, I'll kind of show you the numbers. But can anyone guess how much of Jira users that we would have across our enterprise? 50,000, anyone? Close to that. It's 120,000 users, right? So what I'm here to kind of talk about is what are all the challenges that we had, right? We kind of started with a server instance, went to data center instance, and then what are all the optimizations that we did within the data center instances and the benefits that we realized in terms of migrating to a private cloud, which is for us hosting data center in AWS. And how is that actually helping us in terms of getting migrated to SaaS, right? I will kind of highlight through that, right? So one thing I really want to kind of clearly establish, we are not there in the SaaS cloud yet, but whatever we have done to date is helping, paving as a ramp for us to kind of accelerate the migration towards the SaaS, right? That's what you're going to hear from me and from the rest of my team. So we kind of briefly talked about the scale. Today, where we stand, and then the modernization journey that we are going to go through, and the benefits and key takeaways is going to be presented by Farhan and Vishal at the end of this, right? So everything that any question, right, I kind of can ask before I do anything is why are we doing this, right? I mean, just because everybody is saying, hey, go to cloud, should I be there? Why am I doing? What is the value I'm adding to my end user, or what is the business problem I'm really trying to solve here, right? So our goal or our purpose for this is to kind of provide a very resilient, better performing platform for our developers and for our business users without any available 24/7, without any disruption to our developers and to the applications that speak of it, right? So until we kind of recently migrated, we don't even know how many integrations that actually are there, leveraging the Jira APIs that we have kind of rolled out. And as a part of this, we were able to also clean it up. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit. So just to kind of talk about the scale a little bit, right? We had 24 different Jira instances, server instances, and close to 45 million comments, 110,000 unique users, which I believe probably is growing as we kind of speak, because that user growth is accelerating. Even though I said there are 45,000 developers, the rest is actually coming from our business end user community, which basically means they also use the Jira for non-SDLC purposes, right? And then the numbers around the new issues are probably a little bit misleading because it's 9,500, but the reality is we do have a sprint cycle that we kind of entire organization kind of gets aligned to, and close to 85% of those issues actually get created on the day of the sprint that it begins, right? So that particular day, our system takes a heavy beating, right? And what are the challenges that we went through, right? So can you guys imagine me having a hair? I used to, right? Before starting with this, job. And the challenges that we kind of went through are to try to support the 45,000 developers that we have and the 120,000 total Jira users were numerous. Just to kind of reflect on that impact a little bit, even if our systems are down, say, for like an hour, and 10% of our users are actually actively using that system, that is close to like 10,000 people actually who are using that system at that particular instance in time. And we are impacting productivity of 10,000 people across our organizations. And definitely we were not good enough way back when we were trying to operate on standalone instances. So there was clearly a strategy kind of we put together. But then purely on the operational side, imagine maintaining 24 different set of instances with a group of 15 people across our organization. There is always something wrong at some point in time. And I kind of also briefly touched upon the sprints start cycle and end cycle kind of coincides across the organization. And there were literally days where, if it is a Tuesday and Wednesday, which is kind of like the alternate Tuesday and Wednesday where the sprint cycle close and begin times, and I would literally want to hide behind my desk because of I know for that day, the performance issues are going to happen, right? And we definitely are in a better spot now. I'll kind of explain how we get there. And then at the same time, we were always behind the number of releases that Atlassian had. We were, I think, at some point in time, we were N-5 version or 4 or 5 versions behind. And there was a rightfully so from our end user community saying, hey, with the new release of Jira, we are having all these features. Why is it not available to me? Right? I'm pretty sure you guys can relate to that and have to go through that, right? And then add-on nightmares, right? Across 24 Jira instances, depending on which instance that particular user is connecting to, and the version of that particular instance, and the add-ons that goes on. So there is too much of complexity in terms of trying to maintain all these things. But ideally, where we want to be is to not, do we really want to be managing all this for us, or do we really want to focus on addressing the business problems that the user faces, right? So those are some of the operational challenges that we kind of went through. And the platform challenges, right? Being a financial organization or a fintech basically means that we have to go through a lot of regulatory compliance. For example, if an image that we are running on has vulnerabilities, or if there is a security scan that detects something, we have to do a constant upkeep of our infrastructure. I would rather, as I said earlier, focus on addressing the business user problems rather than the infrastructure maintenance that our teams used to focus on. And again, it's not just about the particular infrastructure, it's the database version, the patches associated with it, and every single time there is a patch that gets rolled out, the availability of our system goes down. We do have a mandate of maintaining 99.9% availability, not just the uptime, but also the performance SLOs, and we were way behind, even 90.1%, which truly reflects on and impacts the productivity not only of our developer, but also our business users, right? Those are the challenges both on the operational side and on the platform side that we actually went through. So I think now we went through a modernization journey across 3-4 years. I think I'm going to invite Farhan, who manages the Jira space for our team, to kind of come and speak a little bit more on that. But just to kind of set the stage a little bit. When I laid out all those problems, we don't have any of those problems right now. And he's going to help explain what we did to kind of get to that particular point in time.
Thank you, Gopi. One thing I want to assure you, I didn't play a role in reducing the number of hair he has on his head. So if at all, maybe we're helping him grow that. So first thing I wanted to share with you is how we got here and where do we stand currently. As Gopi alluded to earlier, right, we are not completely on completely on public cloud, but we started off somewhere with this modernization journey, right? So that's when it was 2018. Most of our servers were running on Jira Server. We have 24 servers that we were running, and all of those problems that we talked about earlier about operational and platform challenges were core at that point in time. And then we started off introducing data center. Obviously, we didn't jump in day one when it was released, but we started off on that journey in 2019. It took us a couple of years, given our scale, to get onto data centers. We are still running some server instances during that time. And then 2021 is when we started taking the leap into AWS, right? We started migrating our services to AWS. We ran a hybrid model where some data centers would run on-prem, and some of them run on AWS, right? And then in 2022, I think mid-2022, 23, we started our public cloud journey into the Atlassian toolset. We have some workloads running on public cloud right now. Most of it is people that have started new. These are not workloads that we have migrated, but we are going through that process right now. And what our future looks like, we've specifically not put a date there because, again, for us, it's going to be a multi-year journey getting onto cloud itself. So that's where we are right now. So one of the questions that people might ask is, why not start with Atlassian Cloud itself? Why go through the journey of moving to AWS or modernizing what you have, doing your data cleanups? Just take the bite, go to Atlassian Cloud and use that like day one when it was released, right? So we couldn't do that, right? And there were quite a few reasons why we could not do that, and we've highlighted some of them here. First one is around the user tier itself. You already saw the user numbers we have, and one of our largest instances is 110,000 users. The smallest one is 35,000, right? So the user tier support from Atlassian, though it has been increasing over a period of time, it's still not caught up with where we want for JPMC. So today, as I said, we run some workloads because we think it'll support the 25,000 user base that we have. The second reason was around the time it takes for us to do assessment of all of our apps, right? I know like you are running your Jira instance with like maybe 20, 30 apps. Maybe show of hand, like how many of you run Jira instances where you have more than 25 apps? Right, like 25%. So just imagine, right, looking at each of those apps, looking for a migration path for those apps takes time and effort, right? And that's something that we had to bake into our strategy to see when we can actually adopt cloud. And then the third piece of it is around some of the integration systems within JPMC itself that needed to be ready, right? So especially things around authorization and authentication. And we specifically call that out here because end of the day, wherever we want our platforms to run, the developer experience is one of the most important things for us, right? We want to make sure that the users don't have to do a lot when they use Atlassian Cloud, right? So those things we had to work through, which took its own time, and also other integrated systems, right? So Jira doesn't run like as a separate instance, which is just used by developers on the UI. There are like hundreds of systems that connect to Jira, pull data, metrics from these systems, So we want to ensure that when we migrated, we had these systems up and running. And also, being a bank, right, we have stringent business continuity plans we had to put in place, test them out, and make sure that those are compatible or are in compliance with the firm requirements. So those are the things why we did not start off with the cloud. But what we'll talk about is what did we do if we did not go to cloud, right? What was the modernization journey for us? What approach did we take, right? So three things, right? And again, this applies to any migration project that you will take up, is looking at your data and analyzing it, right? To see what data do you want to move, right? Do you want to move everything that was created day one, or can you clean up? Can you maybe archive or purge data that you do not need? The second thing was around standardization, is to look at, can we get teams to use Jira in a standard way, right? So that's one of the exercises that we took. And in addition to standardization, we also looked at complying with standardization once it was set up by putting some governance around it, right? And then the last step, which Vishal will talk about in more detail, is around the modernization itself, right? What did we do? Where are we running our service? What tools are we using for that modernization journey? So on the data cleanup, right, just want to take you through a few things that we did that helped us reduce the clutter, if I may say that. And this definitely helped improve the performance of Jira, which you'll see the numbers at a later slide. So one thing is around custom field. You all know, and Atlassian TAMs keep badgering us around that every time, saying, oh, you have too many custom fields, right? So that is one of the first exercises that we took up in partnership with the business units to say, what can we clean up, right? Which fields are you using? Which fields can we get rid of? Because there's an example where we have a line of business field. We have 20 fields with the same name, with a dot in front or a space or what have you, right? So those things were cleaned up. We also looked at removing schemes that were not used. There are a lot of duplicate schemes, right? Your admin will copy a scheme, make a change, and never use it, right? So those things, do add up in terms of how Jira performs. That's one thing that we took care of. And we also put in stringent archiving policies in place, right? So that if you do not use a project or an issue for a period of time, we would archive them, right? And let users come and archive them with maybe a self-service. So that again, helped with performance. And deactivating users. If people are not logging into the system, like why have their accounts in there, right? And like slow down your assignee lookup and things like that. So deactivating users, one of them. And also looking at functionality duplication within apps itself, right? As I said, we run about 70 apps across the board. There are some functionality that is duplicated across apps, right? Taking a look at them, removing those apps helped our journey. And then once you do the cleanup, if you leave it there, you'll end up at the same place 6 months or a year later, right? So one exercise that we took up was around standardization. We worked with a line of businesses to come up with project templates that they can use across their business units, right? Even if not for all of their projects, but at least for a large chunk of their projects, people were accepting to use templates, and we did that. And also looked at consolidating instances by business use cases, right? Like development teams could be on one instance for a business unit, whereas business team who use it for work management or things like that, they were moved on to another instance, right? And we did a lot of investment in self-service capabilities. So when we are looking at migrating almost 9,000 plus projects, you cannot have your admins do that manually for each of them, right? So we did build an inbuilt system which helped project admins go do a self-service where they would migrate their project. They would do a mapping of how their existing field will look like in the new template and go through the migration process itself. And also reporting capabilities, right? A lot of our our customers needed data from Jira, right? Where they would make thousands of API calls to get that Jira data. So for those reporting tools, or reporting systems, I should say, we moved them onto a consolidated database where they could pull that information directly, right? They don't have to be dependent on us, or they don't have to make Jira slow with their REST API calls. And then lastly, we put governance in place where the business teams took ownership of the templates, right? The Jira admins did not have to tell them what to use. They would decide for themselves, saying what workflow works best for them and what fields do they want. And then we set up appropriate approvals in place so that if that business unit approved a particular custom field creation or workflow, we would go ahead and create them, right? So those are the two things about data cleanup and standardization. Now I'll hand it over to Vishal, who will talk about what we did on the modernization piece.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Vishal Chinchole. I'm a lead engineer for Jira in JPMC. So I'm going to talk about our infrastructure modernization journey. So as Gopi and Farhan already spoke about the challenges that we had, operational and platform-related challenges. So we decided to adapt public cloud services. So last year, we migrated 10 data center instances to AWS. And all these migrations were seamless. There was no user impact when we migrated them from on-prem data center to the AWS. Like after the migration on a weekend, on Monday morning, any user coming to Jira, they didn't even realize that now their Jira instance is running on AWS. Because even when they launched the old URL, it was redirecting to AWS, and that's how user found out, oh, now their instance is running on AWS. So there was no end user impact of any sort. We also have fully automated pipelines set up for infrastructure build and application deployments. So we are using infrastructure as a code, Terraform modules. And for application deployments, such as for Jira installation of software and applying custom configuration on top of it, we are using code deploy for AWS. We also have automated our add-on deployments, add-on installation. And last year also, we did 2 minor upgrades of Jira with a fully automated process and zero downtime. So we are also using the observability tools such as Grafana and CloudWatch to monitor the performance, and also it checks the functional availability of the Jira. So there are critical business transactions such as create issue, view issue, JQL search, and dashboard, which are used to measure against our service level objectives. To maintain the healthy environment, as Farhan mentioned, right, just one-time cleanup is not enough. We have to maintain it. So we had some applications which integrated with Jira, and they used to make huge number of API calls. It used to be almost 500 calls in a minute. So we worked with those applications. We found out why they are making those API calls. And we also took advantage of a rate limiting feature, which was introduced in Jira 8. And we throttled the number of API calls coming to Jira. So that helped us keeping the performance of Jira, especially during peak business hours and the sprint days. So those were the days where we used to get a lot of issues during performance. But adding rate limiting on top of it really helped. Also data cleanup, we have two-step of archival process. One is a soft archival, which we archive projects which are not updated in the past 60 days. And those gets automatically archived every week. Like automated job runs on Friday, and it archives those projects. Similarly, for issue archival, any issues those are not updated in the past 13 months, we archive those, and it takes care of the issue archivals. This job runs daily. And for long-term archival solution, we take the XML backup of the project and put it in the offline storage for long-term retention. We also introduced some self-service capabilities for our end users. As Farhan mentioned, we used to deactivate users. If they are not logged into Jira for, let's say, 90 days, we deactivate those users. So if those users come back and they want to log into Jira, they cannot log in. So for those users, we have a self-service capability where they just submit the form with their ID, and with a click of a button, they get self-activated. Similarly, we have introduced service desk project creation, which is fully automated process, and also adding service desk agents to the service desk project, which is created recently. We have also invested in the observability tools, which measures our usage pattern, such as what is the current load on Jira, and how many number of connections or how many number of calls coming to Jira. So that helps us identify those heavy users and work with them and find out an alternate solution which can avoid direct impact on the Jira application. So with the optimization, with the standardization, and with the modernization that we have in place, we are seeing some benefits which are already there on the screen, but a couple of them are really significant and which really helped our end users a lot. So as you see here, 60% of major incident reduction, that's a huge win for us, because before we used to be on AWS and before we optimized our instances, there used to be issues like every month, as we have 10 data center instances, one or other data center instance will always have some or other issues. But those issues have significantly reduced, and we are really seeing the benefits of that. Similarly, for infrastructure management, as we have to keep our infrastructure up to date with the infrastructure as a code, it's it's a straightforward way. Like any infrastructure change, we can just update a single line of code, and it will be reflected. So these are some of the benefits and key SLOs for our critical business transactions, such as create issue, view issue, JQL, and Jira boards. These are a huge win for our end users, because they are the ones who are really seeing benefit of this modernization journey. So with this, I'll hand over back to Farhan to talk about key takeaways. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishal.
Thank you, Farhan.
So at the end of what we wanted to share was, having gone through the exercise of doing the data cleanup, going through the journey of modernization, putting things on AWS, what has it got us, right? You looked at the benefits, but how is this really helping us in terms of our end goal, which is to be on public cloud, right? So here's what we learned, and maybe if you maybe do that exercise, if you take some of the cue from this, you could benefit from as well, right? But from our perspective, we think we are much more well prepared, right, to execute the public cloud journey now, right? Having taken the time to address the concerns that we had, whether it was business continuity related or not having view into who uses our system, or having issues with integration and things like that, right? So now we are better placed. We know who is going to be impacted, and we can take that leap into public cloud, right? Informing those customers when the impact would be and what they can do to make it seamless for them, right? And also with the whole standardization exercise and consolidation, this is going to make life simpler for us when we do the public cloud migration, right? Because we don't have to worry about going and validating thousands of schemes. We have business units now, like some of our largest business unit is literally on one standard template. So all we have to validate for them is that template, is that workflow working? Do they have all the custom fields that they need, right? So it's much more simplified, not only for us, even for the users. Like if one LOB contact goes and validates, that's good enough for us because he's validating for their LOB, right? And the third thing is around the whole user experience piece, right? Now when we migrate to public cloud, given these are consolidated instances, when we move them in unison, right? All of those business units move at the same time. They are not worried about team A was moved, team B is still on data center, and I cannot interact and I cannot report on them. So that user experience is going to be much more improved than it would have been if we moved it as is, right? So that's where I'll end, and we can maybe take questions if we have. The last picture was just to show everyone the whole complexity around how much traffic went between Jira instances when we were in 2018-19 to where we are now, right? Because if there are obviously business units having their own instances, they don't need to talk to everyone in the bank. They are only talking to the business units that they worry about, right, for reporting purpose and things like that. So yeah, it has reduced a lot of traffic between the instances. This might not have a direct impact on performance, but it's a lot cleaner for business teams to come in and see what projects they want to look at and operate at. Okay. With that, we call Gopi and Vishal on stage, and we'll take any questions that you have.
Can you explain how you automated deactivating users and automated add-on installs?
Automate the users. How did you automate the users and reinstall them?
Automate.
Deactivating users
Deactivating.
and automating add-on installs.
Okay. You want to take that?
Yeah,
Vishal?
I'll take that. So for deactivation, the users, we are just removing them from the licensed group. It's a default group for Jira users. So we take that group out of the users. So that way they are not able to log into Jira. And the licensing cost is saved.
Yeah, so just to add to what Vishal was saying, right? So the way the authentication works for us is like, based on AD groups, right? So if a user belongs to a particular AD group, then he has access to that instance of Jira, otherwise he doesn't, right? So once we know that, okay, that particular user has not logged in the last few months, I think 3 months is what we are
90
using
days,
now.
yeah.
So then the user gets removed from that particular group automatically. And then we also kind of put a reactivation process in place where it's a self-enablement. If they want to kind of log in, they just have to try login, and then that user automatically gets added back to the group. So that way we don't have to introduce any latency or any processes in terms of like deactivating versus reactivating the users.
Hi, thank you so much. I think the execution slide helps everybody. And I think that should be the motto for everybody, even on cloud or DC. Excellent one. So I have 2 questions. I think in preparation to adopt Atlassian Cloud, what process are you taking or steps to deprecate DC functionality on application or add-ons for the features that are not available on cloud? Is the expectation to look for a match at that time? Second one is, how are you planning to reduce the footprint of new features that cloud provides? Is the investment being done on others, or are you looking that cloud already provides and we're looking for those footprints?
Okay. I'll take the first one. Maybe Gopi can take the second. Right. So on the first one, one of the initial exercises that we went through was to look at taking an inventory of what apps we use and what functionality we use, right? Like it can be done maybe having surveys with your users or knowing what features they use, right? And then we worked with our TAM to look at, are these supported in cloud? Some of this exercise we could do, right? We could just go into the marketplace, look at some of the information. But we're working with our TAMs to figure out where a particular apps vendor does not have a plugin in the marketplace today. How can they help us get there, right? And if a vendor comes back and says, we don't have a plan, you should probably look at alternatives, that's when we go to the next step of looking at what an alternative can be, right? And then the whole decision around, could we build that functionality? If we can, if it is simple enough, or we go to another vendor and start evaluating, right? So that's the process that we are going through right now. And again, we are working closely with Atlassian, giving them feedback, right? Saying if there is a plugin that is integral to your ecosystem and that's not supported, that's going to be problematic, right? So that's where Atlassian can come and help us as well.
So just to add to what Farhan was saying, right? We also had a small connect with Michael before this, and we asked the exact same question, right? That's a significant problem that anybody who's looking to migrate to cloud has to go through, right? One of the things that at least like we are trying to do is to not to kind of like, a lot of people come to us and say, I need this plugin, right? Rather than, hey, here is the problem that I really want to solve, right? You try to pivot that conversation back into, here is the problem that I'm really trying to solve. Then there are like, some standard plugins that are actually available within the apps ecosystem that is supported by cloud that they can migrate to, right? And this is also like a good segue for the second question that you asked, which is, how is the end user experience is going to be when you're part of the data center and then when they go into the cloud ecosystem, right? It's not going to be as seamless as Vishal was explaining when we did the migration from data center from on-prem into AWS cloud, because those are like apples to apples comparison. In this case, like, so there are, from what I could feel and from my limited usage of the cloud futures, it is kind of like getting, pivoted towards how modern users will feel and how they want to work through in terms of the workflow rather than like the older way of how we used to do things, which is in a good sense. And at the same time, is there going to be a learning from an end user standpoint? Absolutely yes, right? I think we should plan for a little bit of a learning curve that will be associated with it. And from my experience, at least, like, probably for a couple of weeks, there is going to be some disruption that happens. But, I trust in, like, how adaptive human beings are. They resist the change, but then, once they are there, they figure out a way to kind of like navigate through this. So I wouldn't like worry too much about it, but yes, we need to also plan for that particular change management in terms of like, here is how I used to do things on-prem, and here is how you used to do the same thing on cloud.
Thank you for the talk. Question on the benefits slide. Everything was nice to get to the cloud, get benefits. One number caught my eyes about the infra management effort. I was expecting to get huge reduction on the thing going to cloud versus on-prem. It says only 10% less effort. Any explanation on that? Thank you.
Yeah, infra cost. You want me to take it?
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so when we are on-prem, right, running on VSI, PSI infrastructure, we used to spend a lot of time just sitting, waiting for the SAs to complete their job, right? Whether you look at maybe an Oracle upgrade or patches or what have you, right? We had to shut down our systems, wait for them to complete their work, stay there for 4 hours if they wanted to, and then restart those systems, right? But then now with being on AWS, we own the infrastructure piece as well, right? But does that mean like we are spending time with Unix SAs and DBAs? Not really, right? We are upgrading our own systems, and obviously with taking advantage of cloud, right? Most of our upgrades, whether it's RDS or what have you, literally don't have any downtime, and we decide when those upgrades will happen, and obviously we are spending less time just waiting on people to do that job for us, right? So that's where that 10% is. Maybe you want to add
So
on.
there was also a question on the financial aspect of it, like, do we have financial efficiencies around it?
Yeah, definitely, right? In terms of just the infrastructure piece itself, for us, we saw a lot of cost savings in terms of running on AWS. Just the cost that we were paying our technology teams for the same CPU or memory consumption that we had, we are definitely paying less on the infrastructure piece as well.
So the main savings actually came to us in terms of we are actually required to have a DR and main prod, right, where we have to kind of flip. But when we actually went into AWS, we have the ability to kind of spin off the instances based on our existing Terraform pipelines, which probably takes less than half an hour to kind of build that infra, right? So straight away there is even though there is no infra cost, it's a straight away 50% reduction in terms of the CPU usage, because otherwise it is there whether we use it or not. Those are some of the financial efficiencies that we were able to achieve.
Yeah, makes sense. One of the pain point actually for on-prem is, to your point, database, not just that, they want to upgrade this, so we have to make sure there's operational cost to us to figure out the system is up, or base Linux underlying needs to be patched, bring this down, up, down, incident you have to deal with. So I was a lot of time spent on that, but I thought if you're going to cloud, it would go away. So that's what I thought maybe you would get, 80% less time when you go to cloud. So that's what I was kind of surprised. 10% is a low number compared to things. Maybe it only includes certain aspects of thing.
Yeah, I think the way we look at it is how much time is the resource spending on the infrastructure pieces itself, right? So if I put 80% there, that means we are only doing Jira administration 20% of the time, right? So that was not the idea of putting that percentage out there, if you understand that correctly.
Yeah, thank you.